Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Welcome back to Dark Poutine. I am Mike Brown.
Part 2.
Yes, part 2.
With Matthew Stockton.
Yes, the great Matthew Stockton, who hails from Strathroy, Ontario, currently residing in the Eagle's Nest in downtown Vancouver, British Columbia.
And Mike, who hails from New Brunswick, currently residing in Abbotsford.
Matthew, you cheeky monkey. You know I'm from Nova Scotia originally, and now I live in Langley, British Columbia.
If we say it often enough, it becomes true.
That's not how it works. Okay, anyway, let's get on with this episode. Enough of this.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Dark Poutine podcast are solely those of the producer and do not necessarily represent those of Curious Cast, its affiliate, Global News, nor their parent company, Chorus Entertainment.
Dark Poutine is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. Our content is often intense, and some listeners may find it disturbing. We're not experts on the topics we present, nor are we journalists. We are ordinary Canadian schmucks chatting about crime and the dark side of history. Let's get to it. Put on your toque, grab yourself a double-double and a Nanaimo bar. It's time to scarf down some Dark Poutine.
You are responsible for obtaining and maintaining at your own cost all equipment needed to listen to Dark Poutine. Dark Poutine can be addictive. Side effects may include, but not be limited to, pausing and questioning the system, elevated heart rate, pondering humanity, odd looks from colleagues as you laugh out loud at work, family members not into true crime worrying about you. Positive side effects may include some perspectives and opinions that you disagree with, as well as some wokeness and empathy. If you don't think Dark Poutine is for you, consult your doctor immediately.
Christine Marion Jessop was 9 years old. She stepped off a school bus in Queensville, Ontario on October 3, 1984, walked to the corner store for a piece of gum, and headed home. She was never seen alive again. Her body was found on New Year's Eve, 56 kilometers away in a field near Sunderland. She had been sexually assaulted and stabbed. She had been lying there for 3 months. Christine's murder produced one of the longest and most expensive criminal proceedings in Canadian history. It destroyed the life of an innocent man who lived next door, as well as exposing catastrophic failures at every level of the justice system. And for 36 years, it left the real killer completely untouched. For listeners coming to this story fresh, Guy Paul Morin was Christine's next-door neighbor. He was arrested in 1985, acquitted at his first trial in 1986, retried after the Crown appealed, and convicted of first-degree murder by a second jury on July 30th, 1992. He was sentenced to life in prison and transferred to Kingston Penitentiary. He maintained his innocence from the first hour of his arrest to the last words he spoke in the courtroom. He spent 18 months in Kingston Penitentiary before his lawyers brought a new application with new evidence they believed would exonerate Guy Paul Morin in Christine Jessop's murder. You're listening to Dark Poutine episode 429, part 2, Justice Prolonged, the murder of Christine Jessop. DNA technology had advanced significantly in the 10 years since Christine Jessop's murder. A sample of the semen recovered from Christine's underwear had been sitting in evidence storage ever since. 3 previous attempts to extract a usable profile from it had failed. In December 1994, scientists tried again. On January 18, 1995, they determined that typing could proceed. The following morning, counsel for both the Crown and defense authorized it. That night, at 10:33 p.m., they were advised of the result. The DNA from the semen could not have originated from Guy Paul Morin. On January 23, 1995, the Ontario Court of Appeal convened. Senior counsel Kenneth Campbell addressed the court, quote, "The evidence proves as an indisputable scientific fact that Mr. Morin is not guilty of the first-degree murder of Christine Jessop and should be acquitted," end quote. Morin's conviction was set aside and an acquittal was entered. Guy Paul Morin had been under the cloud of a murder charge for just under 10 years. The Kaufman Commission report, the public inquiry that would spend years examining everything that went wrong, opened with a plain statement of fact. Quote, "The real killer has never been found. The trail grows colder with each passing year. For Christine Jessop's family, there is no closure." End quote. That was written in 1998, and it would remain true for another 22 years. Guy Paul Morin was 35 years old when the acquittal was entered. A few days after his exoneration, he sat in his lawyer's office and spoke to reporters. There was, by most accounts, very little of what you might expect. He was calm. He was at moments even humorous. Quote, "I've known I was innocent for the past 10 years, he said. And finally, DNA has proven it scientifically." End quote. What Morin understood immediately and said so implicitly was that his exoneration solved nothing for Christine Jessop's family. The DNA had excluded him. It had not identified someone else. The semen on Christine's underwear belonged to a man whose name nobody knew yet. For the Jessop family, the acquittal landed a bit different than it had the first time. Bob Jessop told reporters he wasn't ready to accept that the case against Morin had collapsed. For some, after 10 years, it is difficult to let go of an idea you were so convinced of as factual, especially when no answers as to the identity of the real perpetrator followed. Christine's brother Ken saw it differently. Quote, "A sadistic, dangerous person is still out there," he told Maclean's magazine. "Attention should now be turned to the search for Christine's killer. The Morins need to know. I personally need to know. I feel like I've been lied to for 10 years." End quote. The Jessop family came apart in the years that followed. Bob and Janet divorced and sold their home in Queensville. Ken moved to the Niagara Falls area. The house on Leslie Street, the house next to the Morins, with the cemetery behind it, passed into other hands. Ontario Attorney General Charles Harnick issued an official apology to Morin and his family. On January 24, 1997, the Ontario government awarded Guy Paul Morin and his parents $1.2 million in compensation. Durham Regional Police Chief Trevor McHaggerty offered what he called a, quote, "full, unequivocal, and unconditional apology for our mistakes which led to this wrongful conviction," end quote. On June 26, 1996, the Ontario government commissioned a public inquiry into the wrongful conviction of Guy Paul Morin. The commissioner was Justice Fred Kaufman, a retired judge of the Quebec Court of Appeal, meticulous and methodical. His mandate was plainly stated to determine, to the extent possible, quote, "how and why did the administration of justice fail in this case," end quote. Ken Jessop took the witness stand. He leaned forward, stared across the courtroom at Guy Paul Morin, the man he had once fervently believed killed his sister, and apologized directly. He said police had pressured him and his mother to change their accounts of when they arrived home on October 3rd. Quote, "I'm sorry, Paul," he said. "We thought we were doing the right thing, what the police told us to do," end quote.
So this is one of the most disturbing moments of the case for me, because we're no longer talking about investigators misinterpreting evidence. We're talking about investigators allegedly changing evidence.
Yeah.
The timeline wasn't some minor detail. The timeline was the case.
Mm.
If the original times were correct, the Crown had a serious problem.
Right.
If the times moved, the theory worked better. And if police really pressured witnesses to alter those times, like some people said, that's not tunnel vision anymore. That would be investigators trying to make reality fit their theory instead of making their theory fit reality.
Yeah, that's not justice.
And a homicide detective has one job, Mike: figure out what happened.
Right.
Not improve the facts, not massage the facts, not help the facts along, right? Figure out what happened.
That's what justice is, yes.
Yeah, and if this allegation is true, it's some of the worst police work that we've seen on this show. And in fact, could be considered criminal if it were true. If what the witnesses said they were told to do to change stories is true, that's not just bad police work, it's criminal.
Yeah, there's a standard of integrity that should be expected of police officers, whether or not they're trying hard to solve a complicated crime. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a criminal lawyer, but feels like it to me.
Susan McLean, one of the prosecutors at the second trial, testified at the inquiry tearfully that she was not proud to have been involved in prosecuting an innocent person. Morin, for his part, emerged with a quality that struck observers as remarkable. He married, he had 2 sons. He bought land with his compensation payment and largely withdrew from public life. When asked about the inquiry's conclusions, he said, quote, "In dealing with the system, I've always questioned why. Based on what's been given today, my questions have been answered." End quote. That from a man who spent 10 years answering for a murder he didn't commit. Christine Jessop's killer, meanwhile, heard the news of Morin's exoneration and, according to Toronto Life's reporting, became a constant presence at local pubs. He told his wife he was going out to work. He had been careless at the body site. He knew there had been semen recovered. He knew now that the police had DNA technology and the knock at the door was coming. It was only a matter of time. But he was wrong about that timeline. It took another 25 years. Meanwhile, the inquiry ran for 10 months. 120 witnesses testified, detectives, prosecutors, forensic scientists, and the jailhouse informants themselves. The transcripts from both trials, plus all appellate documents, ran to more than 100,000 pages. When the report was released in April 1998, it was 1,380 pages long and contained 119 recommendations. Lawyer Bruce McFarlane, who had spent his career studying miscarriages of justice, called it arguably the most comprehensive judicial review ever undertaken into the causes of wrongful conviction. What it found was not one failure. It was a system of failures compounding each other. On tunnel vision, the report documented how investigators had fixed on Guy Paul Morin as their suspect before they had any credible evidence against him, and how that fixation shaped everything that followed. Evidence that pointed away from Morin was discounted. Witnesses whose accounts didn't fit the theory were interviewed until they remembered things differently.
That sentence should stop all of us cold. Here it is again, right?
Yeah.
Witnesses whose accounts didn't fit the theory
Right.
were interviewed until they remembered things differently. I'm saying that again for a reason, right?
Right.
Not until investigators discovered new evidence, not until the witness suddenly recalled something they'd forgotten, until they remembered things differently.
You can see how these interviews might have gone. Wasn't it like this and not like that? Are you sure it was like this and not like that? It doesn't make sense that it was like that and not like this.
And I've said before that tunnel vision is a human problem. But this is where it becomes a policing problem.
Yeah, it was Guy Paul Morin's problem in a big way.
Because investigators are supposed to protect evidence from contamination. They're supposed to preserve witness memory, not shape it.
We've seen this so many times in so many different stories.
The moment a detective starts nudging a witness towards the answer he wants, he's no longer collecting evidence, he's manufacturing it. And maybe that's the most dangerous thing about tunnel vision. You know, most people imagine it as detectives ignoring evidence, but sometimes it's worse than that, Mike. Sometimes it changes the evidence itself.
So usually this kind of tactic, this you're not remembering things correctly or that kind of thing, is used when you're talking to a suspect. You're trying to trip them up. But this method shouldn't be used at all when you're talking to family members who have nothing to do with the crime.
Yeah.
Yeah, save that stuff for the suspects and not for the Jessops. Come on.
Indeed.
Kaufman's report used language that remained striking. Those responsible had displayed tunnel vision in the most staggering proportions, end quote. He used those words specifically about the lead prosecutor at the second trial and Detective Fitzpatrick, who even after Moran's proven innocence, after May's recantations, and after May had falsely accused both of them of conspiring to frame Moran, continued to believe in his guilt, at least publicly. On the forensic evidence, the hair and fiber evidence presented at both trials was found to be, in Kaufman's words, quote, essentially valueless. It had, quote, little or no probative value in demonstrating Mr. Moran's guilt, end quote. This was the evidence that the Crown Counsel at the second trial had regarded as some of the most significant against Moran. It was the evidence Mr. McGuigan had built his visual display around, running red ribbons across the board, connecting Moran to Christine. It was worthless. More damaging still, the Center of Forensic Sciences in Toronto had a contamination problem that predated both trials. The rule requiring scientists to wear lab coats during fiber examinations was not consistently enforced. Some analysts wore street clothing, meaning fibers from their own garments could have transferred to the evidence under examination. The contamination was known to analyst Stephanie Nisnik and her colleague Norman Erickson before the first trial. They did not disclose it to police, prosecutors, defense counsel, or the courts. The report found this was done to avoid embarrassment to themselves and to the center, not out of malice toward Guy Paul Morin, but that it afforded them no excuse. Further fiber evidence that might have helped exonerate Moran was never communicated to either side. On the jailhouse informants, Kaufman found that the testimony of May and Mr. X was, apart from their core claims, quote, patently unreliable. Their personal records showed diagnosed propensities to lie. Prosecutors at the second trial, confronted with those records, spent their energy minimizing the evidence rather than reconsidering whether to use the informants at all. The report called for strict new limits on the use of jailhouse informant testimony in Canadian courts. The report closed with an observation that Kaufman delivered in a room that held Guy Paul Morin, his mother, and both Janet and Ken Jessop. Quote, science helped convict him. Science exonerated him. We will never know if Guy Paul Morin would have ever been exonerated had DNA results not been available. One can expect that there are other innocent persons swept up in the criminal process for whom DNA results are unavailable. End quote. That hits hard. The case of Guy Paul Morin, he said, was not an aberration. The causes were rooted in systemic problems, the same problems that have led to wrongful convictions in other jurisdictions worldwide. Christine Jessop's murder remained unsolved. Toronto police had taken over the investigation from Durham in 1995, inheriting a list of more than 360 potential suspects. Over the years that followed, hundreds of tips, hundreds of DNA swabs, no match. In 1998, the task force was quietly disbanded. The trail, as the Kaufman report had warned, was growing colder with each passing year. What nobody knew, not the investigators, not the Jessop family, not Guy Paul Morin, was that the answer had been in the files from the beginning. More after a quick break. Oh boy, we're back at the halfway point, and jeepers creepers, that's a lot of writing you did there, fella.
Yeah, well, this one upsets me. So
It should upset everyone.
I don't want to forget the little girl that lost her life in all of this.
100%. Christine Jessop is the focus.
Right. But Guy Paul is also the focus because this is about injustice, right?
Right.
And we've covered wrongful convictions before, Mike. And many wrongful convictions involve genuine mistakes, right? Somebody misremembers or somebody misidentifies or a forensic technique turns out to have been unreliable. And, because, human beings get things wrong. But listening to this case, I keep coming back to a much darker question. And that is, at what point does this stop being bad investigation and start looking like the construction of a case?
Yeah, exactly.
We're not talking about one thing. We're talking about witnesses being pressured. We're talking about timelines changing. Evidence that helps is being minimized. Evidence that's hurting him is being amplified. Informants are being treated as credible when they clearly aren't. And all of it seems to flow in exactly the same direction, and that's always towards Guy Paul.
Yeah.
I don't know what word people want to use, like tunnel vision or misconduct or confirmation bias. Pick your favorite. But what I know is this: if you keep pushing witnesses and reshaping timelines and stretching evidence until it supports the person you've already decided is guilty, you're no longer trying to discover the truth. You're trying to prove something of what you believe.
Yep.
And when the goal shifts from finding the truth to proving a person guilty, innocent people end up in prison. And that's exactly what happened here.
That is entirely what happened. Yep. Detective Steve Smith joined the Toronto Police in 1996, the same year the Kaufman Commission began its hearings. He spent 2 decades building a reputation as a methodical, tenacious investigator. In 2015, he tracked a famously agile bank robber known as the Walter Bandit through Europe. In 2017, he was part of the team that caught a serial bank robber by gathering police from across Ontario, comparing notes, and triangulating the suspect's hometown. His boss, Hank Idsinga, the detective who had caught serial killer Bruce MacArthur, recognized in Smith the kind of analytical patience that cold cases demand. In 2019, Smith was assigned to the Homicide Squad's archiving project and moved into the cold case unit. That same year, he attended a 2-week training seminar on a relatively new investigative methodology called forensic genetic genealogy. The technique had made international headlines the year before when American investigators used it to identify Joseph DeAngelo as the Golden State Killer, a man responsible for 13 murders across California who had evaded capture for more than 40 years. A few months after the seminar, Smith applied the methodology to the Christine Jessop case. The challenge was the sample itself. The semen recovered from Christine Jessop's underwear in 1984 had sat in storage for 35 years. It was highly degraded. Standard DNA profiling had been attempted multiple times over the decades, including the 1995 testing that exonerated Morin. But each attempt had either failed to produce a full profile or produced one that couldn't be matched to anyone in existing law enforcement databases. The inhibitors in the sample kept blocking the process. Detective Smith sent the evidence to Othram Incorporated, a company based in Woodlands, Texas, that specialized in recovering usable DNA from exactly this kind of compromised biological material. Othram had the technology to work past the inhibitors. They processed the sample and produced a DNA profile, partial degraded, but workable. The profile was uploaded to GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, the 2 major commercial genealogy databases that explicitly informed their users that their data may be searched by law enforcement. An opt-in came later. The commercial giants Ancestry and 23andMe require warrants before cooperating with police. GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA did not. What came back were partial matches, not to the killer himself but to his distant relatives. People who had submitted their DNA to trace their family histories with no idea their ancestral curiosity would one day become a thread in a murder investigation. Forensic genealogist Anthony Redgrave of Redgrave Research in Massachusetts was brought in. He and his team spent 6 months constructing and reconstructing family trees from the matches that came back. It was painstaking, iterative work. Building branches, eliminating dead ends, circling back, rebuilding. Quote, "We just came in and finished out what had already been a very long investigation that had tried a number of different things," Redgrave said. His team, he explained, built the family tree, quote, "multiple times over and over until we found out how the whole logic puzzle came together and led us to one man," end quote. The DNA pointed to two possible families. Smith and his team investigated members of both, discreetly, methodically, without tipping anyone off. Eventually, the scope narrowed. One name remained: Calvin Dana Hoover. Calvin Hoover had died in 2015. His blood had been drawn at his autopsy and stored at the Center of Forensic Sciences in Toronto. On September 30th, 2020, police obtained a warrant, one of the first in Canada, authorizing the use of a deceased person's DNA for investigative purposes to access that autopsy sample. The comparison was run. The DNA from Calvin Hoover's blood matched the profile from Christine Jessop's underwear. The identification was made October 9th, 2020. 6 days later, Toronto police held a press conference. Ironically, and perhaps a bit of a vindication for them, the sample that had solved the case had been stored at the Center of Forensic Sciences. This was the same institution whose analysts had contaminated evidence, withheld that contamination from courts, and helped send an innocent man to prison. 36 years later, it was their storage facility that held the answer.
Yeah, and there's an irony here that is almost too perfect, right? Mm-hmm. The same institution that helped convince a jury that they had the right man ended up preserving the evidence that proved they had the wrong one.
Yep.
You know, I think that's an important reminder that, institutions don't have intentions, people do. And the DA didn't care about reputations, and the DNA didn't care about careers or theories, right? It didn't care about what detectives believed or what prosecutors argued or what juries decided. It just sat there for 36 years waiting for somebody to ask the right question, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons why DNA has transformed criminal justice is because it doesn't negotiate.
Yep, 100%.
Human beings do. DNA doesn't.
When Detective Smith's team narrowed the genealogy work to Calvin Dana Hoover, he was someone Smith had never heard of. Hoover's name had never come up in the thousands of tips that had flooded the case since 1984. He was not in the Durham files as a person of interest. Calvin Hoover was born in 1956. He was 28 years old in October 1984. He and his wife Heather were living in North Scarborough in the East End of Toronto. Both were working at Eastern Independent Telecom, a small communications outfit in Markham that provided telephone wiring for businesses across the region. Heather was a dispatcher. Calvin did installments. The lead hand of the installation team was Bob Jessop, Christine Jessop's father. The two men worked alongside each other. They became friends. The friendship extended outward the way workplace friendships do. They spent several evenings and weekends together and were present in the other parts of each other's lives. The Hoovers and the Jessops gathered for barbecues and birthdays. The wives grew close. Janet Jessop called Heather the Goofy Newfie. Heather sometimes babysat Christine. Christine called her Auntie Heather. The nature of his work gave Hoover a certain freedom. Cable installation was itinerant. Jobs across the region, hours that varied, travel that could take him anywhere. Toronto Life reported that Hoover had developed a pattern of leaving home for hours at a time, day or night, without explanation. His family grew accustomed to his absences. By October 1984, the Hoover connection to the Jessop household was intimate enough that when police asked Janet to name people who had standing permission to enter her home, even when the family wasn't there, Calvin Hoover was on the list. 3 days before Christine disappeared on October 1st, she had been at the Hoovers' Scarborough home with her mother and brother. She knew the family well. She would have known Calvin Hoover by sight, by name, by the easy familiarity of a family friend. Investigators believe, based on evidence compiled in police court filings, that Hoover knew Christine would be home alone on the afternoon of October 3rd. As he worked with Bob, he knew Bob was in jail. He knew Janet had plans to visit Bob that day, and he knew Ken would be with her. He knew a 9-year-old girl would come home from school to an empty house. The day after Christine's disappearance, October 4th, a York Regional Police officer visited the Hoover home to speak with Heather. She was the one interviewed, not Calvin. There is no record in any file across any police service that Calvin Hoover was ever asked a single question about the disappearance or murder of Christine Jessop. Calvin Hoover attended Christine Jessop's funeral in January of 1985, just like any family friend would. There was no heat on him at the time.
And this is the part that should haunt and shame every investigator who worked on this case.
Why so?
Not because they failed to solve it, but because they failed to ask the most basic question. Talk to the people closest to the victim.
Everybody. Talk to everyone, yeah.
Not the weird neighbor, not the clarinet player, not the guy who made detectives uncomfortable.
He was a beekeeper.
Because they wouldn't have a beer with him, right?
Yeah.
Talk to the people who had access. Talk to the people who were trusted.
Yeah.
The people who could walk through the front door without raising an eyebrow. Right? When we talk about tunnel vision, this is the cost. It's not just that you look too hard at one person, it's that you stop looking entirely at anyone else.
Yeah.
And, while all of that attention was focused on Guy Paul, the man who actually killed this little girl appears to have walked straight through the investigation without ever being meaningfully examined.
It's disgusting.
So bad.
Hoover's name appeared twice in the cold case files Toronto police inherited in 1995. He was listed as a Jessop family friend, identified as Heather's husband. Neither entry flagged him as a person of interest. The task force that worked the case for 3 years and cleared more than 360 suspects was disbanded in 1998. Hoover was not among the 360. He was not among anyone, really. He was only 2 lines in a notebook. Police later established that he was familiar with the Sunderland area, 56 kilometers from Queensville, where Christine's body lay for 3 months before Fred Patterson found her on New Year's Eve. A friend of Hoover's lived near there. He had visited the area before. He knew the roads, the fields, the distance from the world he'd left behind. After Morin's exoneration in 1995, Hoover began to fall apart emotionally. His marriage eventually collapsed. He moved again. He remarried and was widowed. He ended up on a rural property in Port Hope, Ontario. In 2015, Calvin Hoover died alone in his garage. His son came home and found him. He was 59 years old. The blood that later pointed to him as the suspect was drawn at his autopsy, and it sat in storage for 5 years. Then Steve Smith came calling. On October 9, 2020, Detective Steve Smith drove to Janet Jessop's home and told her in person that the Toronto police had identified the man whose DNA was found on her daughter's underwear 36 years ago. He stayed with her while the press conference was held without her. When Interim Police Chief James Raymer stepped to the podium at Toronto Police Headquarters, he described Christine the way her mother always had, a girl who loved life, her family, school, and sports. He said her face had been on every television set and in every newspaper. He said that the police had positively identified the person responsible and that Calvin Dana Hoover, the man he named, was deceased. He said conclusively, quote, "However, if he were alive today, the Toronto Police Service would arrest Calvin Hoover for the murder of Christine Jessop." End quote. Raymer confirmed that Hoover had been 28 years old in 1984. that he had been closely acquainted with the Jessop family and that he had never previously been identified as a suspect. He had died in 2015, and there had been no foul play in his death. The chief then asked the public for help filling the timeline of Hoover's life between 1984 and 2015. Quote, "Today's announcement is only the first very important answer in this ongoing investigation," Raymer said. "It has obviously generated many more questions." He paused. "There are no winners here." End quote. Before the press conference, police had also reached out to Guy Paul Morin. They called him to let him know a person responsible for Christine Jessop's murder had been identified. They didn't tell him the name. Morin released a statement after the press conference. It read in part, "I am grateful that the Toronto police stayed on the case and have now finally solved it. When DNA exonerated me in January 1985, I was sure that one day DNA would reveal the real killer, and now it has. I am relieved for Christine's mother, Janet, and her family." End quote. He'd waited 25 years to be able to say it, and he was able to say it without any bitterness. Janet Jessop told CBC News, quote, "I am very glad that it's over now. The end has come. We have now some closure." End quote. She had never given up, she said. Through the trials, the appeals, the inquiry, the task force, the long years of silence, she had held on. Quote, "You just push on. You just keep going. Never give up. You just can't give up. That's not fair to Christine." End quote. Detective Smith said both Janet and Bob Jessop had told him they were afraid they might not live to see this day. Ken Jessop, who had spent 36 years carrying the weight of his sister's murder, who sat in courtrooms watching an innocent man convicted twice, who had put his own history on display before a jury, who had twice tried to end his own life, spoke to Global News. Quote, "Like anything in this case," he said, "it couldn't be a simple answer. It had to be someone we knew well." End quote. He said he felt horrible for Hoover's children. They had grown up together. They had played together as kids. None of it was their fault. He called for an independent review. The Jessop family and Innocence Canada publicly asked why Calvin Hoover had never appeared on anyone's radar as a person of interest over 36 years of investigation. There has been no independent review. Heather Hoover, Hoover's first wife, the woman who had worked alongside Bob Jessop, who had become Janet's close friend, and who had babysat Christine, released a statement through the family. Quote, "We are all devastated by the announcement made this week. Our hearts go out to the Jessop family. We ask for privacy at this time while we all come to terms with this horrendous news that was as shocking to us as it was to the Jessop family." End quote. She later told CBC that she kept coming back to one thing, the DNA. Quote, "That type of DNA don't lie," she said. "There's only one way it got there, and that just don't lie." End quote. And then she said, "I've thought many times things could be so different. If I had known way back then, if the cops had done their job a little better." End quote. Bob Jessop told the Fifth Estate he didn't remember much about Calvin Hoover. Quote, "That was the unknown thing at the time, unbelievable to a degree as to why he would even do it. It seems to me that he must have had some reason for it. I can't figure it out." End quote. Calvin Hoover faced no charges. He was never arrested, never questioned. He was never named in any courtroom. He died in a garage in his Port Hope home in 2015 without anyone ever coming for him. 5 years before, a detective named Steve Smith pulled a family tree apart and eventually found his name at the end of it. In the language of policing, the Christine Jessop case is cleared. There was no trial, no conviction, no sentence, but there was a press conference, a photograph of a dead man on a screen, and a chief of police saying what would have happened if things had been different. What this case left behind was substantial. The Kaufman Commission's 119 recommendations worked their way through Ontario's justice system over the years that followed. Juries now receive explicit instructions on the limitations of forensic evidence before they are asked to weigh it. The Crown Policy Manual was rewritten to govern the use of jailhouse informants, requiring rigorous documented assessment of their reliability before prosecutors can use them, and establishing that their testimony should be prohibited as a general rule. The standards for preserving and disclosing forensic evidence were tightened. Police interview techniques that shaped witness memory in this case, without malice, as Kaufman noted, but with devastating effect, were examined and reformed. The Morin case is now taught in law schools across Canada as a study in how tunnel vision, inadequate forensic standards, and unchecked informant testimony can compound each other at every stage of a proceeding until an innocent man is sitting in Kingston Penitentiary. The Morin exoneration, alongside the wrongful conviction of David Milgaard, a case we covered in episodes 224 and 225, also accelerated the creation of Canada's National DNA Databank. The legislation was passed in 1998, the same year the Kaufman Report was released. The databank launched in June 2000. It currently holds more than 700,000 DNA profiles. There is a specific and painful irony in that number. Calvin Hoover was convicted of impaired driving in December 1996. Had the DNA Identification Act been in force at the time, or had its scope been extended to impaired driving convictions, his DNA would have entered the databank when it opened in 2000. Toronto police would likely have matched it to the crime scene sample within years, not decades. The Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police later cited the Jessop case explicitly when arguing for expanded DNA collection powers. The technique that ultimately identified Hoover, forensic genetic genealogy, was the same approach American investigator. The Jessop case was among the first in Canada to produce a public identification using the method of forensic genealogy. Detective Superintendent Peter Code, speaking at the October 2020 press conference, was careful about what the technique could and could not claim. Genetic genealogy, he said, provides a potential, and I must stress a potential family lineage, that investigators must then build from conventional means. It narrows the field, it does not deliver a verdict. The confirmation in the Jessop case came from a blood sample drawn at autopsy, a biological fact that admitted no ambiguity. What the case cannot answer is everything that happened between 3:45 on October 3, 1984 and New Year's Eve. No trial means no public presentation of evidence, no cross-examination, no record of what Hoover said to Christine, how he came to be on that road at that moment, and what he did in the hours and days that followed. The police appeal to the public after the announcement was significant. Tips came in by the hour, Smith said. Police spoke to more than 50 people who had known Hoover. Whether he committed other crimes, whether anyone around him knew or suspected anything, whether the full picture will ever be assembled, those questions remain. Heather Hoover has said she visited Christine Jessop's grave regularly in the years after the murder, while her husband consoled her. Guy Paul Morin has said very little publicly since 2020. His statement on the day of the announcement was brief, in its final line directed not at himself but at Christine's mother and his concerns for her. Christine Jessop is buried in the cemetery behind the house where she grew up in Queensville, Ontario, the cemetery where 23-year-old man once searched for her in the dark and found nothing. Fresh flowers appear at her headstone. A note left there on October 15, 2020 read, quote, "We never met you, but we know people who knew and loved you. May your beautiful soul finally rest in peace." End quote. Christine Jessop was 9 years old when she died. Today, she'd be approaching her 52nd birthday. And that's it for Dark Poutine episode 429, part 2, Justice Prolonged, the murder of Christine Jessop. That's right, it's time for voicemails. you can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week. Alrighty, here's our first of 2 voicemails.
My name's Elena. I'm from Ontario, Canada, and I love your podcast. I've been listening to it for a few years now. I just wanted to tell you guys that you guys are great. Thanks.
Well, there you go, short and sweet. Elena from Ontario telling us that we're great.
Fantastic.
More of those, yeah. Those make me feel good. Warm in the, in the bottom of my poor little heart.
Warms you to your cockles.
What does Elena do there in Ontario, and where in Ontario is she, Matthew?
Ontario is pretty big, isn't it?
It is a big place. Yeah, it certainly is.
It is a big, big, big place.
Yep.
I'm going to guess that she is from Raymore.
Where is that?
Raymore is like on the Trans-Canada Highway.
So I've driven through it.
More north, up near where's the biggest town? Near Timmins.
Oh, near
so
Timmins. Yeah, okay.
If you're going up, you go past Raymore, you turn left at Matheson, and then you're headed towards Timmins. I think she's from there.
Okay, and what does she do there, Matthew?
What does she do in Raymore?
Yeah.
I think she teaches at the École Catholique Sainte-Thérèse.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, thank you, Elena. Yeah, well, because Elena could be a French name. So, yeah, absolutely.
I know.
All right. Let's listen to our second voicemail here, Matthew.
Hi, Mike and Matthew. My name is Stephanie, and I was so excited to listen to this week's episode since it took place in my hometown of Valleyfield, Quebec. I was especially intrigued because I had never heard of this story before. The Montreal Cotton Company was such a central part of life in Valleyfield, and at one time it shaped much of the town itself. The company had its own school, church, and homes for its employees. The main part of the factory still stands today and now houses a museum dedicated to that period of our history. It was fascinating to hear a story I knew nothing about from a place I know so well. Thank you for recounting stories from our country's dark past and bringing these important histories to light. It's both compelling and deeply interesting to listen to. Thanks, and go shit in your hat, or as we say in French, allez chier dans votre casse.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was brilliant. I love that.
No, I'm glad she called in because, when you're talking about the amount of money that they had, I was like, that is a lot of money. So it absolutely was. I was thinking this company was big, and she's saying that it was they had their own school. It was huge.
And this is what I live for, is bringing somebody a story from their hometown that they weren't aware of. I love that. I love that I was able to do that. So
I think Stephanie owns a wool shop in a cotton town because she's a little bit of a rebel.
Okay. A little bit of a rebel. Got some cotton wool going on. Is it cotton wool?
No, it's just wool. So she sells wool for knitting in a cotton town.
Well, how about them apples? Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome. And once again, we do have some new patrons and Donut Money donors. From Dallas, Texas, we have Tara Walters is a new patron. Dallas, Texas.
Thank you, Tara. Jess and I recently started rewatching Dallas.
Okay. What streaming service is Dallas on? I don't think I know.
I don't know. It's on one of the. I don't call them streaming service. Justin laughs at me. I call them channels.
Okay.
It's so much easier. I'm like, hey, what channel was that on? And he'll be
Essentially, it is
like,
a channel.
he'll like
yeah.
Prime, right? Yeah. So we've started watching Dallas again for fun.
There you go. That's kind of fun.
You know, I have this great picture of a friend of mine with at a party. At Sandra Rhodes' house, actually, with Larry Hagman and Divine, not in drag.
Oh, yes. Yeah, you've sent me that picture.
Yeah, I've showed you
really
that.
funny.
Yeah. So, so Tara, it lives in Dallas. I've been to Dallas.
I've been to Dallas, too. I've been to the book depository where Lee Harvey Oswald supposedly shot JFK. I've been there, too.
I went for meetings. And now I have that song in my head. That's right. You're not from Texas, but Texas wants you anyway. You know that song?
The stars at night are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas. So I don't know that other song, no. But what does Tara do in Dallas, Matthew?
I think she is a show promoter.
A show promoter. Well,
yeah,
that's
like
fun.
Musicians.
Okay, musicians.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, there you go. So
she puts on, she like promotes shows, puts on gigs and stuff like that.
There you go. That's kind of cool.
Lyle Lovett did that song. That's right. You're not from Texas.
Oh, so you're looking him up. I always thought Lyle Lovett looked like the guy from the David Lynch movie Eraser.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah,
100%. I agree.
Yeah. We were talking sort of a little bit about David Lynch online, and you want to have a sleepover party.
Literally, before you finish that sentence, I knew exactly what you're going to say.
Yeah, it's funny. Anywho, well, thank you so much, Tara Walters. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Tara. Thanks for sending the love from Texas.
Next, we have Betty Blancas, and Betty is from Reno, Nevada, the other big gambling spot there in Nevada. You and I have been to Nevada together, Matthew.
That's where Las Vegas is, isn't it?
That is correct, yeah. And then we drove to Area 51 and all that kind of stuff. So what do you think Betty Blancas does there in Nevada, in Reno, Matthew?
Betty Blancas sounds like
it's a great
showgirl name.
It's a great name, yeah.
And it also makes me think of that Jane Siberry song where she goes, I could have been Miss Punta Blanca. I could have, but I didn't want to.
I don't know that song.
You don't know the song?
The only Jane Siberry song I know, sadly, is Meet Me on the Beach. That's the only.
And then, Jane Siberry has some great songs, but Betty Blancas, that is a fantastic name.
It really is, yeah.
Betty has like gay best friends 100% with a name like Betty Blancas, right?
Probably.
You can tell like gay guys love Betty Blancas.
Well, there you go. We have another donut money donor. It's our good friend Amy Irvine. She says, keep up the great podcasting. I always enjoy the episodes. Where is Amy from, Matthew, and what does she do?
Amy is from Utah.
Okay.
And
I don't know that I've ever been to Utah. I think I might have crossed the border there a bit from...
Well, there's an Amy Irvine in Utah who wrote a book on
spit it out. This is not a visual thing.
It's actually quite interesting.
Okay.
Is a public lands advocate.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Public lands wrote.
So I'm going to say our Amy Irvine is, and it's and Amy is not to be mixed up with Amy Irving, the actress who I also always get mixed up with Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio.
Okay, I don't know who either of those people are.
You don't, the two actresses, Amy Irving and any listeners out there who've thought the same as me, please call in, or am I insane? I've always mixed up Amy Irving and Mary Elizabeth Master Antonio.
You're probably not insane. Well, you're insane about a few things, but...
And Michael, you have seen both actresses in many movies, probably.
Probably. I just don't know their names. All right. We do have an Interac donor this week.
Yay.
And that person's name is Keisha Marie Corhonen Henry. So we'll call her Keisha, I think. So I don't have to say that that big long name again because I probably got it wrong. Where is Keisha from? And I'm probably even butchering her first name. And what does she do for a living, Matthew?
Is there a $sign in her name? K-E dollar sign?
I don't think she's that person. I don't think she's that person. No.
Okay.
I'd be surprised if it was
would be
that
funny
person.
if like Keisha actually.
Well, then I would say, will you please mention us on Instagram or something to your millions of listeners or viewers?
I think, so I'm going to go with, so Texas, Dallas, I had lots of fun there. Reno, I've had fun there. So I think that a place I'd like to go is Nashville. So I'm going to say she's from Nashville. I've never been to Nashville, and I want to go to Nashville.
I have been to Nashville. I have been to the Grand Ole Opry Museum and all that kind of stuff there.
My grandparents used to listen to the Grand Ole Opry every week.
With Minnie Pearl, and she still got the price tag on her hat. Oh, boy.
Minnie.
Yeah, fun stuff.
Yeah, in case she's a hat designer there.
There you go. And next up, coming to us via PayPal, we have Patricia McKenzie. And Patricia says, in loving memory of Steve.
Thank you, Patricia.
Much appreciated, Patricia. What does Patricia do and where does she live, Matthew?
Patricia lives in Albuquerque, New York.
It's New Mexico?
No.
You said Albuquerque, New York last time?
Oh, no. Is Albuquerque becoming my...
Yeah, it's becoming your thing.
My go-to. Because, I'm obsessed with Albuquerque.
But you didn't know where it was from last time. You said it was New York, and it's actually New Mexico.
Sorry. I was mistaken. She's from Turkmenistan.
Oh, she's from Turkmenistan. Okay. Yes. Well, that's a little bit further away. What on earth does she do in Turkmenistan?
She lives in Ashgabat.
Okay.
And she sells white marble.
White marble? Oh, interesting. Yes.
So she ships white marble out of Ashgabat.
For memorials and stuff like that?
No, Patricia actually sold me my countertop in my kitchen.
Oh, well, there you go. Your white marble countertop. That was.
You do realize that is one slab of white marble, Mike?
Yes. It's gorgeous. Yeah, it's gorgeous.
It's beautiful. Waterfall, white marble.
Oh, boy. Next up, and last for this week, we have Toree, Toree, just supported us with some donut money. And what does Toree do for a living, Matthew? And where does Toree live?
Toree runs the Williamstown Theatre Festival.
Okay. Where's Williamstown?
In Williamstown, Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. I have not been to Massachusetts. I've driven past it. But, it is what it is. I would like to go someday, see Boston and Harvard Yard, wear a sweater.
Boston has so many beautiful old homes in the center of Boston.
I bet you it does. Yeah.
Like gorgeous, gorgeous old buildings. It's so nice.
I like it when towns keep their heritage buildings. We tend to rip them down here. It's like these old homes out in...
Well, we don't really have old ones here.
Well, they're old, but they're not old. Right.
That's
they're
why
not,
we ripped them down. They're not
Quebec,
old enough to.
They're not Quebec and Ontario.
They're not enough. They're not old enough to not be ripped down.
It's true, but in Nova Scotia, there's homes that get ripped down that are gorgeous. So
yeah, that's too bad.
Yeah, but anyway, it's not. It doesn't happen as much as it does here, but it happens for sure. Thanks to all our patrons and Donut Money donors, past and present, for your generosity. It helps to keep the show going. You can become a patron of Dark Poutine at patreon.com/darkpoutine. For a one-time donation, you can send us donut money via PayPal or interact using our email address, darkpoutinepodcast@gmail.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, it would mean a lot if you did. You can easily find Dark Poutine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you haven't gotten yours yet, my 2 books are available to order via links on the Dark Poutine website or anywhere fine books are sold. And speaking of darkpoutine.com, check it out for show notes and other cool stuff. We'd appreciate it if you gave Dark Poutine a like or a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Most importantly, thank you for listening. Tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing. And that is it for this episode of Dark Poutine. So until next time, don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple.
Good.
Matthew, you sounded like a robot there. Oh well. Bye.